Hello and welcome to the fourth video of making an action RPG in GameMaker. So where we left off in the last video, we were able to get movement working for the player. The camera follows the player and we collide into doodads. We haven't rigged up a collision with the water, and we're going to do that with invisible walls rather than blocking out an entire tile set. You can tell it to cause collision with tile sets, but I kind of find that to be sometimes needlessly complex. So we're just going and have trouble controlling the actual size of the hitboxes. So we're going to create some invisible walls. But first, let's you get some walking animations. So that's going to require us to load a lot more sprites in for the player. And so this part is a little bit tedious. I'm just going to duplicate this old one just so I can keep some of the name and make this a little bit quicker. I'm going to call this SPR player idle up. I'm going to double click it to make sure I'm on that sprite. And then I'm going to import the one where the player is facing up. And then I'm going to repeat the process. We're going to duplicate that. This will be the right sprite. Double click it to make sure I go to that one. And then import the facing right idle sprite. Duplicate one more time. Left, and then double click it to make sure I go to that one, and then import facing left. All right, so we've got that. Now we want to make the set of walking sprites, and this actually has an animation to it. So we're going to see how to load in a sprite strip for this to do animations. So I'm going to start with the down. I'm going to duplicate that. And then instead of idle, it's going to be called player walk. So this will be called player SPR underscore player underscore walk underscore down is the name of this one. And that's so that it sorts all the walking sprites kind of in the same category. For this, we really can't do import. Now, if you had each frame of the walking animation as a separate file, you would be able to import, like selecting two files and then hit import, and it will load it as an animation. But in this case, I have a sprite strip that I'm going to use. So importing this isn't going to really help me because the import command, it doesn't chop it up into frames. We actually have to do that through the edit image. And when we go to edit image, if we go up to image and then choose, well, we could do it from here. We could actually go to convert to frames. And then we could tell it 64 by 64 and that there are 2 frames. And so we could then take this existing graphic and it would split it up into an animation for us. But I actually find it easier just to go to the import strip image and then choose the one that we want. This is the walking down thing that we're working on. And then it brings up that same exact menu. We have 2 frames. There are two images per row. The width of the frames is 64 by 64. And the rest of these control like where it starts grabbing the frames from. So you could use that giant sprite sheet and just pull the frames from there just by kind of controlling the offsets. Then we import it. Now, as far as the frame rates, so we do have some control over how fast this animates. If we leave it at the defaults, it goes pretty fast because it's going to run at 30 frames per second. We only have 2 frames, so it's going to go through those frames blazingly fast. I actually would say 4 frames per second, so one incomplete cycle takes half a second. Of course, you can tweak this after the fact and pick one that makes sense for this. So we're just going to duplicate again. We're going to pick up and repeat the process. I'm going to go to edit image, import from sprite strip. This is the up version, so it's this one. And it remembered my settings, so I can just hit convert, and boom, that is done. Although I did make a mistake. Notice that this was the left one, rather than I forgot to double click that. So my walk down, and actually that was, I think, idle left that I broke. So I have to fix that. So be careful when you're making these changes to make sure that you're editing the one that you mean to be editing. And I didn't actually set these correctly. So I have to import the down ones again. So walk down. And then I'll do walk up. I need to make sure I update the frames per second on these, though. All right. So now my walk up is good and my walk down is good. So I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to rename it to walk left. And then double click it to make sure I'm editing this new one. Edit image, edits, import strip image. This is the left walk. So we're going to do that. Exit out of this. And then one more frame, duplicate, right, double click it, and then import walk right. Oops. Edit image, import strip image, walk right, and then it will chop it up. And so now we've got all of the, well, at least a starter set of animations. We will eventually want like an attack animation, like a hit animation. So we will add to this over time. Now, how I'm going to set this up, I'm going to use another script so that enemies and players can kind of share this logic. And so what that means is I want to define my animations as part of the create step. So I'm going to create, so define animations. And these are going to go in the order left, right, up, down. We will need to be consistent about this. And remember the mnemonic that I picked was -x, +x, -y, +y. That's why I chose that order, so that there's some way to remember it. So idle underscore animations. So the idle animations, the left one for the player is SPR underscore player idle left, comma, SPR underscore player idle right, comma, SPR underscore player idle up, and SPR underscore player idle down. So those are the animations listed in the order that I'm going to expect them in. And then I'm going to also copy this and create my walk animations. And I'm going to do this for enemies too. When I get around to adding enemies, we're going to kind of have this same system. And then if your enemy only has one sprite, like you don't have a left, right, up, down, you just put that same sprite in all of these categories. So it doesn't matter which way the enemy would be facing, it's just going to use the same sprite over and over again. Well, we'll see that when we get to enemies. All right, so we've got them. Maybe we'll eventually have attack animations, and we'll have that blank. And maybe we'll have like hurt animations, and that'll be blank. So we will revisit this as we start getting into like, attacks and getting hits. So we'll add some more animations to these lists. But right now we have what we need for movement. So we want a new script, and I'm going to create a new script. This will be called SCR underscore animate, or animation. The method, I'm going to rename this to just animate. And as far as parameters go for the animate method, I really just want a vertical and horizontal. So we'll take horizontal, comma, vertical, and then a preferred state. And again, this script might change over the course of these videos as we begin to add features Like, for example, if you're in the hurt state, pressing keys should not override that. So this may become a little bit more complex over time. Additionally, for at least kind of seeing something new and getting a chance to like experience some new programming things, let's use enumerators. So we'll say enum, capital A. Actually, the style for GameMaker is to do all caps for this. Animation state, open curly brace, close curly brace. And we would name animation states, such as idle, walk, attack, hurt. And so notice there is, in fact, a comma after this. Again, that kind of comes from GameMaker's API about how to do enumerators. And so these are a fancy way of basically corresponding to specific numbers. So when we put this into practice, these are going to behave as essentially idle is going to be equal to 0, walk is going to be equal to 1, attack is going to be equal to 2, hurt is equal to 3. It's really just a fancy way to give names to numbers, because we listed our animations as essentially values in an array. It would make sense for us to have an enumerator for 0 to mean left, right to mean 1, up to mean 2, and down to be 3. So we'll want to do that as well. And so we'll have an animation direction. So we'll have left, we'll have right, we'll have up, and we'll have down. And again, these are really, it's just really a fancy way of doing 0, 1, 2, and 3. Additionally, as we're about to set up the script here, we are going to need to remember on the player what is our current animation state, because if we're changing states, a few things need to happen differently. So we want to add a new variable called animation underscore state. Oh, I didn't want to over collide with that, so maybe we'll just call it anim state. And that will be an integer. And then we're going to have another one called anim direction. And that's also an integer. I wonder if it would let me just use, probably not. So it'll be 0 and 0. So remember, 0 corresponds to idle and 0 corresponds to left, I believe. So we have two variables on the player to remember what my previous states were. So when I send the command to change the state or change the direction, I know if I need to change anything or not to change anything. So moving back to the script, let's kind of play around with this. So first up, we need to calculate a given direction. So we're going to say var new direction. And just for the sake of giving it a value, because I mean we could just do that, but let's just give it the value of my current animation direction. So if horizontal, so if the parameter for horizontal is less than 0, then we want this new direction to be equal to animation direction dot left. Else if this parameter underscore horizontal is greater than 0, that means we're going right, then we want new direction to be animation direction dot right, else if. Now we'll check verticals. So basically what this is doing is this is giving priority if the player's pressing both left and up or right and up, it's giving priority to the left and right direction. So it will prefer to display the left or right animation over the up or down animation. So if vertical is less than 0, then new direction will equal animation direction dot up. Else if vertical is greater than 0, it will be new direction equals animation direction down. So we've now, and I don't want to do just else, because I want it to be possible that you don't reassign this, and in which case the new direction that you want is the same as what you currently have. So it is possible that if you're not pressing any inputs, that we don't change the animation direction. So if the state that we want, so if underscore state, that parameter, is equal to my current animation state, and this direction and new direction is equal to my current animation direction, then just return. End the method immediately. If the new state and new direction are both the same as the old, exit this method with no changes. So assign a default, I'm just putting some comments here, assign a default desired direction of the current direction. All right. So if we've made it past this point, then we want to change something. So that means we will set the new sprite index. So this is the animation or the name of the sprite it will find the animation that we want. So if the desired state is equal to the animation state's idle, then we want to set the sprite underscore index, that's the current graphic of the object in question, equal to idle animations at index new direction. Because remember, new direction is effectively, it's an enum, so it's going to be a number 1, 2, 3. And then that's going to pick the animation out of there. Else if states is equal to walk, then we will do the same thing, but we'll use the walk animations. So then the last thing is just updating the information on the player. So the object. So we want to update the instance variables related to this. So if the state is not equal to my current state, then we want to, so if we are changing states, then we want to set what's called image index to 0. This is the which number frame of the animation to use. So this will set the animation to the first frame. So that way, if you're like on the third frame of a walk cycle and you switch to the attack animation, it doesn't like switch you to halfway through a sword swing, which would make no sense. You want to start the animation at the beginning of the animation. So if we're changing states, but if we're changing directions, we're not going to do this, because if we're in the middle of swinging a sword and we change direction, if we're on frame 3 of the sword swing, we still want to be on frame 3 of the sword swing. This is only if we're changing to a different animation. So we'll say that this and then we will update animation states to be that desired state. So we know what state we just changed to. Changing direction, we don't need to change the frame number for that. So if new direction is not equal to what I remembered to be the current direction, then anim direction is equal to new direction. So this might seem a bit excessive for the player movement animation, but it does prevent some janky behaviors, and it's going to work for everything. So the little bit of work that we put into this code now is going to pay off for every enemy that we put into the game. We'll already have animation kind of set up for it. We won't have to code it, and if we need to change the logic, we just change it in one place. So this should make our lives a lot easier. We should be able to, we just need to call it from the player, and then we should be able to see the impact of it. So I can call it from the animation script. I'm sorry, from the movement script. We just have to decide what it means to be walking versus idle. Personally, I think if the player is pressing keys, we should be playing the walk frames, and if the player has released the keys, we should be playing the standing frames, rather than basing it off the movement vector. Because let's say you're on a patch of ice and you're sliding. You don't want to have the player looking like they're walking, because if you base walking on the current, the magnitude of your movement vector, I think we want to base it off of their movement. So we're going to say animates, and then this wanted the horizontal information, followed by the vertical information, followed by which state, which actually we should probably have put this in an if statement. So if absolute value of horizontal plus the absolute value of vertical is greater than, let's just say 0.1. So you're pressing any of the movement keys. We will animate as a walk. Otherwise, seems suspiciously not very indented. Otherwise, we will call idle. So if you're pressing a movement, you get the walk animation. If you are not pressing anything, you get the idle animation. Now we will eventually want to overhaul this script a little bit with like attack states and stun states and damaged states. But for now, and for a vast majority of what we're going to work on, this is going to work really well. So with the playtest, we can now see, whoop, we just crashed. Animation is not set before, oh, oops. Let's see. Right here. Should have caught that. All right, so testing it now, you can see that whenever we press the key, we get the animation of the direction that we want. So, and if you think the player's moving too fast or the sprite doesn't line up, you can always play with the numbers. Like maybe we drop the player's max move speed down to 4. Maybe this will look a little bit more correct to the animation, or maybe speed up the animation. You could play around with this a lot. And so that is the successful part of animating the player. We'll move putting the invisible walls to another video just to segment this out a little bit better. So we'll end this here. So we've got smooth animation for the player. And this works pretty well. So the next video will be all about putting in some invisible walls for my river so that the player can collide into that. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.